Welcome, everyone. This is the January 28th meeting of the ABCGC. This meeting of the Albuquerque Bernalillo County Government Commission will come to order. We have APS board member Elizabeth Armijo. She's excused this evening, along with CAO Sarita Nair. She is excused, but she has asked Mr. Isaac Padilla to sit in on her behalf. All other members are present via Zoom, and we will be having our new commissioner be joining us shortly, Ms. Adriana Barboa. We will have a moment of silence followed by the Pledge of Allegiance led by Mr. Padilla.
I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America
and to the
republic for which it stands,
one nation,
under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Mr. Padilla. This meeting has special procedures given the governor's declaration of a public health emergency and restrictions on gatherings. Therefore, this meeting is being held via Zoom video conference. Members of the public, staff, and media have the ability to view this meeting live through 4 different platforms: GovTV on Comcast Channel 16, the GovTV website, YouTube Live, and Zoom. These live streams can be accessed from most smartphones, tablets, or computers. For those of you watching on live stream, thank you. We are now on item 2, approval of the minutes. If you've had an opportunity to review the minutes, are there any changes to the December 17th, 2020 summary minutes? If not, I'll make a motion for approval. Is there a second?
Second.
There's a second by Councilor Bassan. So Ms. Ortega, can you do the roll?
Commissioner Barboa. Excused. Councilor Bassan.
Yes.
Commissioner Benson.
Yes.
Councilor Davis.
Yes.
Mr. Padilla.
Yes.
Commissioner Piscotti.
Yes.
Commissioner Quesada.
Yes.
Councilor Sena.
Yes.
Councilor Pena.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Now we're on item 3, public comment. We received written comments in advance of today's meeting. Thank you to the individuals who took the time to submit your comments. You should have received those via your email prior to this meeting. And we did also have live public comment available for this meeting, but staff has informed me that no individuals signed up to speak. Now we're on item 4, new business, and it's selection of the chair. But before I get started, I just really want to thank the council members and commissioners who served last year that are not on the committee this year. Council members Harris, Borrego, Commissioner O'Malley, Colley, and Talbert. Just want to thank them for their service. You know, this committee, although we don't make really any formal votes, I think there's a lot of really good information that gets shared back and forth between the city, county, and APS. So thank you. And then I want to welcome our new members this year, which I think we have pretty much the, what did I do with my paper? So we have Councilor Sena, Commissioner Quesada, who's back on, Commissioner Barboa, Councilor Pat Davis, and Commissioner Benson. So thank you for joining us. I think you'll find this committee very interesting. There's a few of us that really just love all this information that gets shared back and forth. So with that, we'll start with the selection of the chair. If there's any nominations for the chair, Commissioner Quesada.
Yeah, I'd like to nominate Charlene Piscotti, Commissioner Piscotti.
I'll second that nomination. Are there any additional nominations? Any other nominations? Any other nominations? Hearing none. Congratulations, Commissioner Piscotti. You, by acclamation, you're the new chair.
Thank you so much.
And then we will move on to the selection of the vice chair. Are there any nominations for the vice chair? I would like to nominate Councilor Brooke Bassan. Are there any additional nominations? Any other nominations? Any other nominations? No? Well, with that, by acclamation, congratulations, Counselor. So I just want to say just real briefly, I just appreciate being chair of this committee. I think this is one of the committees that's, since I was elected in 2013, that I just really made it a point to want to serve, because I think, you know, some of the underlying issues that we have in our community are best served when we all come to the table to communicate and talk about solutions. So thank you again. I really appreciate it. And now I will defer to Commissioner Piscotti. Did you want to take over the meeting from here?
You know, I would love for you to continue, Counselor Pena. I see you have the agenda in front of you, so just go for it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. So then next item, we have approval of the 2021 ABCGC meeting schedule. I'll make a motion for approval of the 2021 ABC meeting. Is there a second? I see a little tiny hand from Counselor Davis as a second. Ms. Ortega, will you take the roll?
Yes, Commissioner Barboa, excused. Counselor Bassan,
Yes.
Commissioner Benson,
Yes.
Counselor Davis,
Yes.
Mr. Padilla,
Yes.
Commissioner Piscotti,
Yep.
Commissioner Quesada,
Yes.
Counselor Sena,
Yes.
and Counselor Pena.
Yes, thank you.
Passes 8-0.
Thank you. So next item is item D, approval of the 2021 reasonable notice of meetings resolution. I'll make a motion for approval. Is there a second?
Second.
Oh, thank you, Commissioner. I was waiting for the little emoji from Counselor Davis. So there's a motion and a second. Crystal, if you can call the roll.
Commissioner Barboa, excused. Counselor Bassan,
Yes.
Commissioner Benson,
Yes.
Counselor Davis,
Yes.
Mr. Padilla,
Yes.
Commissioner Piscotti,
Yes.
Commissioner Quesada,
Yes.
Counselor Sena,
Yes.
Counselor Pena.
Yes,
8-0. Thank you.
thank you. Now, item E, the Lutheran Family Services Program presentation. Commissioner Piscotti, I probably should have deferred to you, requested this item be placed on the agenda. The following individuals will be presenting on this matter. Commissioner, did you want to speak before they begin their presentation?
Yeah, just a little intro. I think their presentation is going to be really interesting. They had reached out to me last week to write a letter of support for a grant for their refugee program. And I've been involved in supporting them for at least the past couple of years. And so they're going to talk a little bit about that and really how the refugee program helps our community and helps people, especially who have been affected by trauma, which has brought them here. So I would love to hear their presentation now.
Thank you. Did you want to introduce them?
I know
Go ahead. I'm sorry, Commissioner.
Fareed Sharifi is here.
That's correct, Sharifi, yes.
And so I don't know who else, if you brought anybody else. So feel free to introduce yourselves.
Thank you, Commissioner. Yes, my name is Fareed Sharifi and I work with Lutheran Family Services. We are a refugee resettlement agency here in Albuquerque, a nonprofit. Our home office is actually in Denver, Colorado, but we're part of a national organization, LIRS, which is actually based in Baltimore, Maryland. There's only a total of 9 voluntary agencies that worked with the US State Department to resettle refugees. And we are one of those agencies, LIRS. So thank you for allowing me this time to kind of share with you some information about our agency, some of our programs that we're currently providing to the community. And with that said, yeah, Commissioner, I think one of my other staff members, actually, Julia was going to be here. She had an emergency at the last minute, so she will not be joining us. But I will, yeah, I'll get us started. So again, let me see here if I can. Oh, thank you. So just a little bit of historical data before I'll briefly kind of touch on some points here. These are not the most updated numbers here, but worldwide, there's actually about 70.8 million people that have been displaced, forcibly displaced. And out of that, Some of them are internally, even within their own country. Some of them are on a neighboring country. About 25.9 million of them are in the neighboring country seeking refuge. And in that process of seeking refuge, UNHCR, which is this, some of this information may be obvious to most of you, but just for the sake of her presentation, I'll just speak on it a little bit. So the United Nations High Commission on Refugees, UNHCR, a global organization, they're in over 34 countries. They're the ones that actually, they're the first organization that actually works with the refugees. They set up camps, they do interviews, they check their backgrounds, they provide vaccinations and food and many other important things for the families while they're in that status. Not really a refugee, because they don't get the refugee status. They seek refuge, but they're really, from a State Department perspective, they're not really a refugee until they've kind of been interviewed, they've done their background checks, and in that process, Commissioner, I just wanted to touch on that a little briefly, that out of even the 70 million people that are actually worldwide that have been displaced, less than 2% of them actually get refugee status. So it's a very small percentage of individuals that actually get the refugee status. And then as UNHCR works with them and tries to, again, in interview after interview after interview, to make sure that their stories match up, that they have documentation, that they do background checks, fingerprints, biometrics. And once they're approved by the UNHCR and their status has kind of been changed to refugee, then all the other countries actually, the other countries actually step in and take a portion of that 2%, and they'll become the host country. And in this case, which kind of leads me to my next topic here. So the US, in the last year of the Obama administration, I think the presidential determination letter, that's what actually determines how much of those refugees that UNHCR has deemed credible and that pass their background checks are actually approved. So when the US State Department takes the next step, step 2, they actually start their own background checks, own fingerprints, background checks, multiple interviews to make sure that nobody passes through that process with any ill intentions toward the host country. So once they get that status, that's kind of the US State Department works with our national agency, LIRS. LIRS would tell us here locally in Albuquerque, you will be receiving a family of 5 or 7 or 10, and you can expect them to arrive maybe in the next 2 to 4 weeks or 6 weeks or 8 weeks. So that's where our role in the local community starts at that point. If we can just go to the next slide, please. And also, just for the sake of our meeting here, a quick distinguishment, because oftentimes the word refugee and the word refugee is used broadly across all spectrums. And again, what I said earlier is the refugee status, the refugee is actually abroad. They're not in the host country. They're seeking refugee status. And once they're approved by that host country, be it Canada, Australia, the UK or wherever that may be, once they're deemed, they've been approved for that host country, the US State Department, for example, in the US, they would give them a visa, give them all the documentation with a clear path to citizenship. By the time they get on the plane, they already have that process started. Asylees are a little bit different. Asylees, we serve refugees and asylees here in Albuquerque, but there's asylum seekers and there's asylees. And asylees are individuals that have actually been through the court system. They're already in country, in the host country. They're seeking asylee status. So the individuals that we had last summer and maybe the summers before at our southern border, they were asylum seekers. So they were trying to come to the host country and then ask for asylum. And then they would have to work this way through the cases, through the courts. And should they be approved for asylee status, then they would be eligible for services through federally funded programs such as ours. So, and also on the subject of asylum seekers, less than 6% of all individuals that come into our country seeking asylum are actually approved. And some areas it's actually like 2%, 1%, 4%. And the variance for that is the reason is just because of the different courts in the different regions. That kind of plays a huge factor in that role. Is there any questions before I kind of go on to the next slide? Okay, thank you. I have a tendency to kind of talk a little bit fast, so please let me know if I'm talking too fast or anything like that. I know we're kind of pressed for time. This is just a couple images of some refugee camps here in Africa, kind of the journey that the refugees take place when they leave their, you know, their home. They just grab what they can grab, and they just walk. And literally you can see the line here, just families moving, leaving everything they've ever known behind, their home, friends, family, belongings. They just, you know, they just leave with the bare minimum just so they can make the journey into the next country. And oftentimes they go across many different borders, across different countries. And you can imagine the horrors that they face on that journey, trying to seek refuge. If we can go to the next slide, please. Again, a little bit, this kind of provides a little more information. The reasons why the asylum seekers leave their country and the refugees are seeking refuge, it's very similar. You know, there could be for religious persecution, torture because of political affiliations, or many, many different reasons because of just ethnic reasons. So the causes are very, very similar. And again, the only difference is that the asylum seekers and the asylees are actually in the host country, where the refugees get that status before they come to their host country. Let's go to the next slide, please. In that process, here in our office, so kind of jumping a couple of steps here, our office here in Lutheran Family Services, we, in the entire state of New Mexico, we're the only refugee resettlement agency. So if anybody actually gets resettled to New Mexico, they would come through our office. Now, there are secondary migrants. If somebody comes into, for example, California, the cost of living is outrageous. They can't make it. They would, you know, as a secondary migrant, they would come to Albuquerque. We would still provide services for them for up to 5 years. This is one family that actually arrived here, right here in Albuquerque. And within our agency here, not only do we provide resettlement services, such as finding them an apartment. So while they're on the plane, or actually before they get on the plane, we are out looking for them, you know, looking for an apartment. We are looking for them, make sure they have a place to stay when the plane actually lands here in Albuquerque. So we assist with housing. We help them find, you know, obtain documents, social security cards, while they're waiting for their green cards, work authorizations, and we get them connected to local services, and then again, get them a job. Most of employment services, and this is the biggest thing that I would like to share with you guys, is that our agency, we're really blessed in our community that we have such a supportive community here locally that most of our refugees here, from the time they get off the plane to the time they get a job, it's literally 2.1 months. 2.1 months is the average time from the time they get here to the time they get a job. They're providing for their families and they're contributing to the local economy. So despite any kind of misperception of them drain on our local resources or anything like that, that's not the case at all. And also, in addition to the employment, case management, we provide services with school enrollments. We get them connected to CNM, ESL classes, wraparound services that can ensure that the refugee has, you know, optimal chance to succeed here in our local community and contribute as fast as possible. And our goal in the agency is self-sufficiency. As soon as we can, the faster we can get them to that self-sufficiency point, that is our goal. If we can, within that, also within those services, we have a refugee farming program. We have the survivors of torture. So here locally, if you guys are aware through various conversations or anything like that, if you hear of anyone that's a victim, you know, a survivor of torture, or a victim of trafficking or anything like that, we provide those case management services for them. So oftentimes we work closely with the state to provide services, much needed services through our agency. In addition, this intensive case management is part of our reception and placement management, which is actually only 90 days. And our goal is to get this family self-sufficient within 90 days of arrival. So you can imagine going to host, you know, a new country, not knowing the language, not knowing where you're at, not knowing how to navigate the transit system, the school system, any kind of services, and still being up and running within 2.1 months. So it's amazing work that's all thanks to our community, our community partners. If you can please go to the next slide, please. This is a list, and although we provide a few more services in addition to what you're seeing here, case management, we have a microeconomic development program, which covers where we provide financial literacy for our clients. We help open up bank accounts for them. We help them, the financial literacy is just invaluable. I think we get their credit started. And on that same note, it's amazing, information I'd like to share with you guys is we have actually purchased 35 homes for refugees here within 3 to 4 years of arrival. Within 3 to 4 years of arriving in the US, having no credit, no money, no job history in the US. So within 1 to 4 years, 0 to 4 years, we've purchased 35 homes. We've actually started, since 2017, we've actually started over 60 businesses right here in Albuquerque. We've had refugees that have opened up a business and then hired 2 specific cases, have hired 7 other locals to work with them in doing their businesses. So really, really cool stuff. We have a refugee farming program. The Tres Hermanos Farm, many of you guys might know it as Tres Hermanos Farm, but it's part of our Refugee Agricultural Partnership Program. We do career pathways, ESL classes, job club, where we do mock interviews with help them fill out applications. We provide tax services, which we're getting ready to do that right now for the tax season. It's a free service to the community, to our refugee clients. As I mentioned, cultural orientation to help them assimilate to their new country, knowing how to contact emergency services. We have vocational programs that we assist them through, tutoring, mentorship, computer literacy. So a really wraparound services all around here in the office. If you could please go to the next slide. As part of that wraparound services here, we are all blessed to have the support of our county and our city. In our state. That is not always the case in many, many different regions. It's not always the case. So we're blessed to be in such a wonderful city and state. But there are always, opportunities for the community and other members of the community to help support our programs through mentorship, volunteer, donations. We take donations, and I guess in summary, I just can't, say enough good things about our refugees here locally. They have, as this commissioner had mentioned, that they've been traumatized on so many different levels and horrors that beyond imagination. But they come here with that hope, with that glimpse of hope in their new host country, trying to make a new life for their children, for themselves. And although the odds are kind of stacked against them, we see it day in and day out that they do amazing things. They contribute to the community, to our wonderful city. And even on that topic of donations, when COVID first happened, many of our refugees were actually like tailors across, abroad. They had donated hundreds of masks. They had bought some cloth from Walmart that made masks, and they donated them here locally in our office to disperse within the community. So they were volunteering with food box delivery for anybody that has been exposed to COVID. Currently, we have over 60 families that we provide food box delivery to on a weekly basis. And that's not just us, that's part of our community partners as well. But the refugees help with that as well, with deliveries, with coordinating the food, putting them in boxes. So they contribute. They're very grateful for the chance to live in a new country and to be a part of that community and to give back. And again, I'm happy to be where I'm at, to be able to work with them, alongside of them, and also alongside of each one of you. So that is really all I have. Thank you for your time. I'm more than happy to answer any questions if there are any.
Thank you. I'll defer back to Madam Chair if you want to have any questions or comments.
Yeah, I just wanted to make the comment that the first time I heard about this program, it was the beginning of last year, because the Trump administration had made a new rule that states or counties couldn't receive refugees unless they wrote a letter to opt in to receiving them. And so I talked with Fareed and I'm like, tell me about your program. How does this work? And when I heard all of this, I was like, of course we want to take refugees. Of course we want to continue receiving refugees into our community. And so since then, I know I've donated with my district directed funds, and there's been some discussions about the refugees helping with a community garden in my district. And from what I understand, that's a part of the farming or agriculture program that the refugees do. So if any of you want to have community gardens, please talk to Fareed. And so Fareed, I'm sure that after this presentation, many people here will want to support your programs.
Thank you so much, Commissioner. And yeah, and I think on that topic, just briefly, I think the national level, even though I think the Biden administration share with you guys on the national numbers and the pulse on the national stage, I think the Biden administration was going to increase the numbers of refugees, a presidential determination, to up to like 100,000. I think at the peak of the Obama year, the most we ever received was about 2016. It was 85,000 nationally. Currently, just to share with you guys, I think although symbolically, the number may be 100,000 or 120,000. Realistically, because the last 3-4 years, much of the capacity within the U.S. has kind of been diminished, or just many resettlement sites have just closed their doors. So realistically, we anticipate realistically probably about 30,000 will arrive this year, even despite what you might read on the news of that number being 80 or 90 or 125. Realistically, we're looking at probably about 30,000 nationally, and it's going to be more of a staggered approach. By the time they build capacity and really get things moving to get to 40 or 50,000, it'll probably be fiscal year 22.
Thank you.
Yes.
Before I go to additional questions, I just want to welcome Commissioner Barboa. She joined us. So next we have Councillor Bassan, followed by Councillor Sena.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Fareed. This was really enlightening for many, many reasons, and I am really excited to hear about what you're doing. How many refugees or refugee families are we helping here in Albuquerque or in New Mexico even?
Thank you for asking that. So I guess since 2012, there's so much information to share with you guys, and I want to touch on everything, but trying to respect your time. So we opened our doors in 2012, and we've helped over 2,000 families in Albuquerque. So since 2012. Catholic Charities was actually resettling refugees prior to that. But I would suspect all in all, maybe about 3,000. Now, many of our families that we actually resettle here, not all of them stay here. So they, many times they go to like Virginia or Texas or California or some other states. But that's how many we have physically resettled here locally.
Thank you. Any additional questions, Councillor Bassan? No? Okay, Councillor Sena.
Thank you for that. Fareed, as the daughter of refugees, I want to say thank you. Really, I would not be here without services like Lutheran Family Services. My parents were not settled here through Lutheran Families, but Catholic Charities and the Leo Tolstoy Foundation, actually. My mother arrived here in '75, and much of what you described is very similar to what she experienced, although it took her a little bit longer since the state had not officially set up a capacity. And I know through experience that the state and the city certainly had the capacity then in 1975 to receive 3,000 refugees within 2 weeks without even having really a basis or foundation back then in '75 to do that. And just the support that they received then sounds like it's being really expanded on through Lutheran Family Services. So I just wanted to say thank you really for everything that you're doing. I did have a few questions. I know you touched on it briefly about how COVID has impacted services, but I wanted to ask, what specifically has COVID done for Lutheran Family Services? Because I know a lot of services have really stepped up in capacities that they didn't imagine. I'm fortunate enough to be on calls every Friday to hear what the refugee and immigrant population's experiencing, but just if you can share just a little bit of how you stepped up to that.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for that question. Thank you for sharing that with me. So because of when COVID happened, I think, as you can imagine, our refugees are probably at a disadvantage to start with, right? So they already have, again, as I mentioned earlier, the odds are already stacked against them every step of the way. So I think our refugees here locally, because, if they're going to lay off people, they would more than likely lay off our refugees, because if there's a little bit of a language barrier, or maybe they can't navigate that PAYCOM just as efficiently as the next person, they're more likely to get laid off. So many of our clients were laid off, and more so in the service sector. I think a lot of our clients that are like say in the hotel industry or restaurants and such, they were the first ones to get relieved. And we still have families to date, 8 months, 9 months, 10 months out, that are still, they keep getting letters that, hey, we're starting to resume services, but we don't need you quite yet. We don't need you quite yet. So our goal when this happened is first and foremost, working with the Department of Health and getting the CDC information. We got it translated and interpreted and dispersed to the community, right? We were trying to make sure that they knew what was going on, that they had good information that they could count on to stay safe, how to stay safe at that point, whatever we knew at that time about COVID, that was what was shared with them, about, social distancing, and the unique situation with our refugees are they usually tend to be in larger family units, right? So they may have 4 or 5 people or 6 people living in one home or 7 people living in one house. So the exposure and the chance of them getting sick, the whole family sick, is a little elevated relative to other family units. So the way we step up is really, we immediately provided the information to them, education. The families that were that there was a loss of job or a reduction of hours, we got them connected to the unemployment insurance. We helped them apply for services. They had weekly check-ins. The unemployment office, and they were wonderful. Honestly, they're really wonderful to work with. Great, but if you don't speak English or you don't speak Spanish, if you don't speak those 2 primary languages, it's going to be pretty tough to navigate that. And we work with them and working with the Department of Workforce Solutions. So they actually helped us kind of figure out how to navigate the system. So we got them connected to those unemployment insurance, and all the while we were trying to get them education and training through other programs that we had here in-house to try to get them other jobs. Some of them moved on to, like, say, security jobs, or some other jobs where most of the security jobs that we got them certifications for, they're by themselves. They're at a site by themselves, not exposed to a large group or anything like that. But that's how we really handled it. More education. We provided COVID kits. We provided any of our families that had COVID. We were immediately in contact and coordination with the Department of Health, making sure that the family knew what was going on, making sure that they stay home. And we got them. We were in contact with the employers to make sure that they don't lose their job, to make sure they had food while they're in quarantine, and whatever they needed, if it was health and hygiene products, food, if they had medicine, needed medicine or anything like that, we coordinated all of that to make sure they were kind of shelter in place, and when they came out of quarantine, to not lose their job. And we overall, I would say, we've really been blessed. We've helped many of our clients find other jobs. So if I had to throw a number at you, I would say maybe about 15% of our clients are still not employed to date. But we've been just fortunate that we just try to get them new skills, or just get them connected to other resources so they can still provide for their families.
Thank you. Commissioner Quesada.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Farid. So my question is pretty simple. You had a list of things that you needed, donations. Is that specifically just money? What other things can we donate to help that community to be successful?
Thank you for that. I think, yeah, it could be the donations. It could be in the form of a gift card, a Walmart card. It could be what we do take because of health and safety reasons. As you can imagine, usually when the families get here, we always buy them like a new mattress, right? We just buy them a new mattress. We get them brand new sheets, brand new pillow covers, brand new towels, just to keep the family safe. Things that we would get donations on, and we're kind of limited capacity. Although we badly need beds and mattresses, like we just don't have enough room to store a lot of that stuff. So because of that reason, I think the donations, if it was even in the form of like mentorship, volunteers, or if it was any kind of funding donated, we could just strictly honor that donor intent and use the funds strictly for those refugee families. Either get them for example, work boots, a work uniform, or something. Like sometimes we have to do that, right? We get them a job and they're required to buy, this and that, before they ever start work. So things like that actually enables us to, provide those things for them so we can get them employed as soon as possible. And again, to come back, our goal of our office is not to put them into survival jobs and then turn around and walk away. Our goal is to get them in that survival job to start paying rent, but get them connected to ESL, get them connected to financial literacy, get them connected to build their credit, so we can get them into our career pathways program, so we can get them out of that, have them become a dental hygienist, have them become get their CDL. I cannot tell you how many of our clients here locally we've helped get their CDLs, and they're on the roads, transporting goods for between cities. So I would say I can easily count probably 20 or more of our refugee clients that have gotten their CDL, and they're providing services for the community, transporting foods and goods across state lines.
All right, thank you for that. I appreciate it.
Thank you. I don't see any additional questions, so I think we'll move
Madam
on.
Chair? Madam Chair?
Yes,
This is Board Member Patterson. I have just a quick question, if I may.
sure.
All right. Thank you so much for what you're doing in our community and across the country. One of the questions I have is, for those who have young ones, how are you making sure that we educate those young ones, those children, if there are children involved? How do we reach out to those that need to be educated who are young?
So yeah, great question. So yeah, anyone that's a family that have children in the home, we immediately, and it's actually within 30 days of arrival, right? So the first 30 days when the families get here, our main goal is we can't find them a job if they don't have a social security card. Even though the work authorization, they come with documents from the US State Department that's legally, like, they're able to work. But I cannot tell you how many times we go to employers, they're like, nope, this is not, I need a green card, or I need social, or I need something like a work authorization card, even though it's the law. But they won't accept it. And when you have 30 or 40 or 50 employers telling you that, like, how many battles are you going to pick to try to go back and forth to provide education? But to answer your question, the first 30 days we try to obtain all their documentation so we can in month 2 get them the job. But within that first 30 days, after they get their vaccination, so after they come here, they immediately get to the Department of Health. They get all their health screenings, their vaccinations, all of that. And then we get their kids enrolled in school right away, based on their age and whatever the zip code they're in. We get them connected to that local school. So, and while they're in that school, we have an RSIP program, which is a Refugee School Impact Program, where we work with Albuquerque Public Schools to make sure those refugee kids are actually going to school. And that actually, if there's facing any challenges with homework or anything like that, that we connect them to mentors and volunteers. We have an after-school tutor program in our office that the refugee kids, many times they walk over from Highland High School pre-COVID, but they would come over here. We'd have a couple tutors help them with math, science, or any subject that they were struggling in.
Let me just share with you, if I may, Madam Chair. We have Dr. Muir from the APS, who's the executive director, and can share with you what we do with our refugees. Dr. Muir, are you on there?
Yes, I'm here. It took me a minute to get to my mute button. Thank you, Member Patterson. Members of the commission, we do have a whole department that is identified for refugees. Plus we have schools that are hubs for refugees, and we work very closely with the Lutheran Family Services. We actually have a written agreement with them on for our students to provide services. And thank you, Farad, you're absolutely right. It's a very quick turnaround in getting students enrolled, and that's mostly because of Lutheran Family Services. They bring those kids to APS, they hand walk them through the process with us, and we do have case managers that are assigned to kids. And so we have some specific programs specifically in the Highland cluster, plus they're throughout the district, but we have some specific programs. So if at any point you want a detailed presentation, we certainly could do that and bring in Brandon Baca, who is the manager for the refugee program in APS, to talk more detail about that. But yes, we love our partnership with Lutheran Family Services. It's been great. And And we go through the same struggles with them for our refugee families and to help provide those services.
Thank you, Dr. Murin. Thank you so very much for the presentation. Truly appreciate what you do, and thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. We'll move on to the next item, which is item F, update from Carol Pierce and Margarita Chavez Sanchez regarding the Homeless Coordinating Council.
Thank you, Councillor Pena, as well as Commissioner Piscotti, for the opportunity to present. And Margarita, I'll start, and then you please jump in too. Our last coordinating council was on January 19th. Our next one will actually be next week. We continue to meet twice a month. At our last meeting, we did a couple things. So we've got this coordinated framework for housing and services. And within that, we wanted to get public feedback on that framework. And that's was approved by the council last fall. But our committees continue to refine and to get the details for each of their committees. So we actually put the framework online, gave the members of the community an opportunity to weigh in and give feedback. We had about 458 people weigh in, and we've got that information that we could provide. And it really weighed whether people were, for the most part, supportive or unsupportive. And things were very favorable. There were people that did disagree with some of the solutions. We have all the comments that we received. And so it was helpful to get that as a piece of the input process. We also similarly continue to believe it's really important to get feedback from people with lived experience. And I think many people can recall, I mean, we've done many community input processes in the past with the community and with homeless individuals. So we're getting ready to launch this. Now, this has a different flavor because what we think is really important with people with lived experience is to really get a little bit more detailed when it comes to sheltered services. So when it comes to emergency shelter, we want to get some of the particulars about, because that's a piece of the framework. In terms of a locker, we know safety is always important. Is that down the hall, or is that in a cubicle by a bed? We already know things about pets and how important pets are. Really trying to understand the composition of how the rooms might be in other services. So that's getting ready to be launched, and how we will do that survey. It'll actually be, people can do it on their phone or access a computer. And we're doing that with our partners. They'll do it out at the West Side Emergency Housing Center. We hope to do it with the people currently in the wellness hotels, as well as we'll be working with outreach providers to really get the input of unhoused individuals. So we talked about that a little bit at the last coordinating council. The other thing we spent time on was talking about the upcoming New Mexico state legislature. And we talked about the one piece of legislation that's coming up is the Housing Modernization Act. And this is a piece of legislation that really kind of balances the rights of tenants and landlords. It reduces some of the barriers that people in our community can feel when it comes to using a voucher or maybe Social Security income or child support as pieces of their income. And there's many other specific pieces in this legislation. And actually, I'll say this will be coming up more specifically on our next week's agenda to vote, and if there's full support from UNM, the UNM members, the county commissioners, and the city councilors to move forward as that legislation. We talked about other pieces of legislation as well. And Margarita, you can tell me if you want to speak more to this, but in fact, I think you should, on the behavioral health initiative and kids, and County Manager Morgan Spock clarified today that won't be legislation, but yet it's really policy and thinking for the behavioral health initiative. And that was talked a little bit about at last week's meeting. So I'll pause, Margarita, in case you'd like to say more about that.
Sure. Thank you, Carol. Madam Chair, members of the ABCJC, at a very high level, it is a priority of the county legislative, both locally at a state level and federally, to prioritize addressing the needs for transition-age youth, particularly in the housing space and the behavioral health space. From recommendations from city staff, we have increased that beyond just youth who are engaged in and or aging out of the foster system, but all transition-age youth who are needing those continued behavioral health and housing support. So this is a legislative priority. We are going to continue to work on future legislation, again, both locally and also chase some federal dollars to support that population. Thank you, Carol.
Thank you. And then the other piece of legislation that we talked about, which is a city ask, is $10 million for capital needs for our gateways as we continue to really want to expand and match the 14 million that the voters passed. And so that's one of the legislative asks. So there was a big chunk of time spent on legislative asks. We will continue that conversation more at next week's meeting. UNM will be bringing forth some legislation for further discussion as well. And some of that has to do with college student hunger, as well as some of the thinking on the Children's Mental Health Code that I'm quite sure Margarita and the county is very involved in that discussion. And so we may be hearing more about that next week. The other thing we talked about from the Facilities Committee is Gibson Medical Center. The process is continuing to move forward for city purchase of that property as a potential gateway. And then we also talked about our response to COVID. So, and that's been a standing agenda item on the HCC, given it's impacting people without homes. So we heard from Dr. Ziodonis, and he is the new executive vice president for the UNM Health Sciences Center. And he gave us an update. That's when UNM was really beginning their vaccination push, if you will. I don't know, beginning, but it was the launch of a big push there at the pit. And he'll be also updating on immunizations next week. We also talked about the system of care that we've currently got in place in our community. And this is in partnership, city, county, and state. So we talked about how we have roughly anywhere from 750 to 800 people in the municipality system of care, city, county, state, for people without homes. This does include the West Side. So we currently, including the West Side, we have 3 what we call wellness hotels, and we have 2 health hotels or people who are COVID positive. So I gave that update. And during that update, I did talk about that the wellness hotels are very full, and that we are seeing more families than we ever typically see out at the West Side. Currently, we don't have a family pod out at the West Side. That was a decision made to comply with the social distancing and everything that was needed. So instead, families are giving the opportunity to be in a wellness hotel. So typically, we're seeing anywhere from 185 to 190 youth 0 to 18 in those hotels. So in the update for the Homeless Coordinating Council, I talked about what we're doing is we are doing a fast track for housing and really applying the resources for rapid rehousing and permanent housing. And we have a housing navigator there to help people get connected to the services. What I know people have questions about. So when I gave that report at the Homeless Coordinating Council, that did launch an article that went in the Journal, I believe, almost the next day. And the article talked about the system and how we were full. This week, that came out in a Journal editorial article, and I want to speak a little bit to that because I think there's some misinformation there. In that article, it asked city councilors to do an emergency appropriation now to get another hotel set up. We don't think that's the solution for addressing this. The solution is to really get the resources, and we do this in concert with the county to get people connected to whether it's the behavioral health services and the housing services. Families are typically, and I think this is part of the misunderstanding, when our outreach teams and all the people that are doing outreach, it's not common that we're having families and encampments in our community. I'm not saying it never happens. When that does happen, outreach providers are getting them connected to a motel voucher or where they need to be. The increased demand that we're seeing is families that, given a choice of maybe being doubled or tripled up with another family or a friend, or maybe in a garage that's not ideal, or given the opportunity to be in a hotel with their own bathroom and 3 meals a day, people are asking for that option. So right now we have a system of entry to get in there, and people work with their case managers to get access to that. I think the other piece of misinformation is in our community, because I wasn't talking about our whole community system. There are other resources for families that are used now. And now COVID has had a fairly significant impact depending on where we're at in this pandemic, because sometimes we have had closed resources. So families do have access to places like Barrett House, Joy Junction, Safe House, depending on if that's a fit. And our case managers, and when I say our case managers, the nonprofits who have case managers are working to connect families with the best place that meets their needs. Also in that article, it spoke to the concern about why would we be putting so much capital money into the West Side. And that article talked about, we've got about $1 million. So that is capital money. That is CARES funding that the city received to make the improvements that we do need out at the West Side. It's not the operational money to start a new hotel. So, and we think that we know as we move forward, the West Side will continue to be a piece of this gateway system that we have. And so, right now we've got people housed out there, and it's part of this whole 750 to 800 people that all our municipalities, city, county, state are doing in this hotel system. So I know I launched in a bigger update there, but that was a piece of, we talk about the COVID update at the Homeless Coordinating Council because it relates to homelessness and housing. And I know many of you had questions, and I've talked to many of you about the articles that were in the journal and talk to you about that and to straighten out some of those facts. So I'll pause there.
Thank you, Director. And I'm sure there's going to be some questions, but we'll move on to Margarita first, and then we'll open the floor for questions.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just, in addition to what Carol said, I think, we echo the sentiment that while the motel vouchers are assisting folks in a period of crisis, it is a very short-term solution. And so the collaborative work between the city and the county to identify permanent supportive housing and supports along the housing continuum really needs to be our priority. We have been navigating the challenges with addressing homelessness in the community for some years now. And I feel like we really were trying to get some traction. COVID hit and it just said, figure it all out again. So we are doing a little bit of a shuffle now. The county has been providing case managers at the wellness hotels to actively work with families to connect them to supports. We have been funding the motel vouchers for families since May at the Ramada, partnering with the APS McKinney-Vento program. And that program continues to be in operation. We're actually working with Commissioner Piscotti to find ways that program can continue to be sustainable in the future. So it does take a village, and we are working to make sure that these families and homeless individuals are having their needs met. But I think it's important to also mention that there are individuals who are homeless by choice. And regardless of the work that we do to find permanent supportive housing or provide supports, all of those things are voluntary, right? So if people opt not to access those services because they choose the lifestyle, it's not against the law for them to choose that route. So we just have to make sure that we keep that in mind. Nonetheless, it is our obligation to develop the services and offer the services to individuals who are willing and receptive to access those services. So thank you, Carol, for covering all of that. I just wanted to add that little pieces of nuances, but absolutely really working on addressing the long-term sustainable supports for these families and individuals really needs to be part of that sustainable vision.
Thank you, Margarita. Are there any questions? Commissioner Quesada. You're muted, Commissioner.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Look, I agree that, temporary solutions are something that we've been doing for a long time. I think more permanent solutions are definitely need to be the game plan. I think it's the better use of our funds. But I do agree with Margarita Chavez on, and it's a heartbreaking statement to make that some people choose. I personally have a friend who is now on the streets who refuses help, likes where he's at. And when I asked him about it, I said, come on, you were doing good. You had a great business, you had a great family, and you've thrown it to do this. And he just says, I don't want to live by anybody else's rules. So if you gave me a place to live where I didn't have to, be clean or take a urinalysis test, and I could just be who I want to be, then maybe I would accept that type of help. And as you know, we cannot do that. We have to make sure that when people are in a facility, they're as safe as they possibly can. So I do agree that there's some out by choice. They feel more comfortable. They feel the freedom. And I have to tell a lot of my friends who disagree with me, the saying that, I think we should, that what they want me to do is, and people, constituents in my district call me and say, I think you should go get a van and go around and pick all these people up. And this is America. We don't do that. They have freedom of choice, but they don't understand that why I can't do that. And yet these are my friends who believe in their freedoms more than anything in the whole wide world. They believe in their guns and they believe in their stuff, but yet these people shouldn't have those freedoms, that they sacrifice those freedoms. And I don't believe that they do. So I just wanted to make that statement saying I agree with Margarita and that, and Ms. Pierce, that, that the long-term solution is definitely got to be the game plan, not only for the ABCGC APS, but I think for the state as a whole. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Are there any other questions? Seeing none, so I'll close the floor to questions, but I just want to say that, I agree. I think I just want to add, since we're talking about choice, I just want to add that I believe that there are some people that are out there by choice, but I also believe that some people are out there because they have chronic conditions in terms of behavioral health, and it really doesn't allow them to be able to access the services that they need or desire. And the same holds true for people who have severe addictions, right? I really believe that really takes over part of who they are. And, the desire to feed that addiction really prevents them, doesn't really give them a choice, but it prevents them from accessing some services as well. So I just want to add that, because I don't think it's as black and white as we'd like to believe it is. There's a lot of people out there really suffering that I know don't want to be out there as well. So with that, I don't know if it's the appropriate time or if it would be during your presentation, Margarita, but I just want to add that, we did have a conversation at last month's meeting about about some information that we had received from some constituents, Peter Kubra, and there were some emails out there about, what we should do. And I had mentioned at the last meeting that I really appreciated their recommendations. And I think that we definitely need to look at, not reinvent the wheel, but definitely need to look at the resolution that was passed in 2014, assessing the gaps in our community. And I intend to put forth a resolution, and I'm hoping that the county puts forth a resolution. And I think it's something that Margarita and Director Pierce are already doing, is collaborating to make sure that, lots of time has passed since then, and we definitely want to make sure that we're addressing and identifying gaps that may have surfaced during that time. But I think that I agree with what we were talking about at last month's meeting, is that, we've done a lot of work and we've developed this framework, and it's taken a long time to get to where we're at now. So is there a need for improvement? Absolutely. And I'm hoping that this kind of re-looking at that gaps analysis that we've used for our initial framework will be important moving forward. So I don't know if you wanted to comment on that, Margarita or Director Pierce.
Madam Chair, happy to address that at a high level. As you mentioned at the last ABCGC meeting, there was a discussion around revisiting the conversation of conducting a joint needs assessment with the city and the county. Since then, myself, Director Pierce, and Mariela over the ACS division have met, and we do all agree that we need to work together and look at the system again. I think there's been a lot of work done over that period of time. It's been about 7 years. And so the gaps and the needs have changed, right? And we want to identify if we have truly been addressing the appropriate gaps, or if we need to make shifts so that we can be good stewards of our respective tax dollars. It has been, again, part of that conversation that the city and the county would share costs and responsibilities in contracting with the provider. And we do have a draft IGA that is being circulated amongst the city and the county. And the hope is that we can get that routing relatively soon so that we can move forward on that gap analysis. We do believe in the county that gap analysis should significantly inform our departments, the Department of Behavioral Health strategic planning, as well as larger planning within the county. And I do think that, I believe that the city also would take that report into consideration in kind of future planning. Again, the hope is that we look at the system, not just a behavioral health gap analysis, not just a housing gap analysis, but a system gap analysis that looks at criminal justice, it looks at housing, it looks at social supports, it looks at behavioral health, so that we really have an opportunity to make an impact on the system. Funding projects and funding programs like we're doing now is great, right? And we're bringing those services to the community. But until we can really look at the system as a whole, it's really helpful to be able to do that.
Sorry. With that, I think we'll move on now to item G, COVID-19 mental health presentation. Commissioner Piscotti requested this item be placed on the agenda, so I'll defer to our new chair.
Thank you. Yeah, I just want to say that our guest tonight, Diane Layden, she's a retired professor, and she had reached out to me a few weeks ago. She was really concerned about the impacts of COVID on our collective mental health. And she brought up some really interesting issues, and I invited her to make a presentation here with Margarita, just to kind of talk about some of the, almost like post-traumatic effects of the isolation we've been through and things like that. So I'd love to turn it over to Dr. Diane Layden. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening. I wish to thank Reina Martinez in the County Behavioral Health Services Department for her help with this presentation. Department head Margarita Chavez County Manager Julie Morgus-Vaca, and Commissioner Charlene Piscotti. Next slide. Hi. I'm a semi-retired college professor. I've studied violence for 33 years with an interest in mental health and serve on the BHI Community Supports Committee. I worked for Bernalillo County in the mid-1970s as personnel director and assistant county manager for labor relations after the county unionized. Due to the extraordinary circumstances of the COVID-19 pandemic, I propose a public information campaign for city-county residents about resources available to maintain mental health. I was moved to make this suggestion by articles in the Guardian newspaper online about mental health effects of World War II on people in the United Kingdom during and after the war. The authors conclude we can anticipate the same experience during COVID-19 and after it has subsided, and should take steps to reduce its consequences. The information on these slides were sent to you by the staff in a 4-page narrative with references. If you didn't receive them, my contact information is on the last slide. Next slide, please. This slide lists individual, societal, and mental health effects of COVID-19. Currently, the unemployment rate is 8% in New Mexico, 7.3% in Bernalillo County, and 6.7% in the US. Individual effects: illness, death, and accompanying fear and grief, family pressures within the home due to concurrent work and school tasks of parents and children, job loss and resulting financial problems that may affect food and shelter, diminished social relations with friends and loved ones, reduced availability of general health and mental health services, long-term health and personal consequences for survivors, students, and workers. Societal effects: massive illness and death, especially in confined facilities such as nursing homes and prisons, overburdened health services, disrupted mental health services, spike in homicide and possibly in suicide, greater impacts on minority populations, rise in poverty, hunger, and unemployment, added governmental responsibilities for vaccines, protective equipment, and medical equipment. Mental health effects: rise in psychological distress and loneliness, rise in number of people seeking mental health services, compounded problems for people with existing mental health conditions, risk of increased crime and violence, rise in drug overdose deaths and alcohol abuse, and risk of increased suicide. Next slide, please. New Mexico News articles on this slide, which are cited in the references I sent you, describe the heavy mental health toll of COVID-19, including a possible risk in suicide. Next slide. The data on the slide are from January 10th. Here are the current data as of yesterday, January 27th. 3,198 deaths, 171,047 positive cases, 11,824 total hospitalizations, 586 current hospitalizations, and 98,042 recoveries. To help meet the general public's mental health needs, I propose a public information campaign through public service announcements in news media, posters at public buildings and offices, healthcare facilities, and voluntary businesses through local chambers of commerce, flyers mailed to voters by the county clerk, and flyers inside the Sunday Journal and weekly advertisements distributed in mailboxes. Everyday people may not know the symptoms of mental health problems and are not enrolled in behavioral health services programs that provide this information to participants. Older people may not know how to navigate to websites on computers or may not own computers. A public information campaign about mental health would show the community what local government can do for its residents' well-being and that it cares. Thank you. Last slide. Questions?
Are there any questions?
Yeah, first, thank you, Dr. Layden, for your presentation. I think that this is a really important topic. I mean, you know, everything that we've been through last year with the COVID crisis, the isolation and the uncertainty, and, you know, whether we were personally affected by illness or the anxiety about whether or not we would contract the virus, you know, death and grief of people around us. It's, you know, it's a huge topic. And I wonder, Margarita, do you have any ideas on how to get information out to let people know, you know, that this is, it's a mental health crisis as well as a public health crisis. So what are your ideas?
Madam Chair, absolutely agree with the sentiment. In the behavioral health space right now, the community is preparing for a post-pandemic behavioral health epidemic, if that is enough of a mouthful. But we are beginning to already see the mental health effects of the pandemic, and I think we have only scratched the surface. By April of last year, we had seen a threefold uptake in our behavioral health services and our community-based providers. And so I think we know that that demand is continuing to increase. It's really important to recognize not only in the community as a whole, but in our frontline workers and our first responders, we are truly beginning to see the mental health impacts in that workforce. We actually have a conversation set up tomorrow to talk about ensuring that we have, you know, trauma-informed processes, de-escalation, and opportunities for our staff to be able to do self-help and care, you know, individually. I think we really think about the clients and the people that we serve in the community, but we really also need to make sure we're thinking about the first responders and those frontline workers who have been working 70-hour work weeks for the last 10 months, right, to really address the need in the community. I think right now there are a couple of strategies. I think number one, I think we need to work collaboratively with our local media outlets for a public messaging campaign. There was a good, you know, strong, robust effort to publicly message the importance of mask use, right? And I think as we progress forward and we have more and more vaccinations, hopefully that language can shift, right? While we're not necessarily going to be stopping mask usage anytime soon, we want to also start talking about, well, every time you put on your mask, is it important for you to think about your own health? Take a breath, relax, de-stress, something that simple. But also above and beyond that, ensuring that the community knows how to access care. That has been something that has been difficult for us to really message through the Behavioral Health Initiative for years. And now with COVID, it's more important than ever. So we are working on developing a public messaging campaign internally within the department to be able to create awareness of all of our existing programs. And that is actually a component that we have discussed and are going to request of our gap analysis to be able to identify gaps that we have missed in messaging out to the community around the services that we provided, and use that recommendation from that provider to further expand that public messaging campaign.
And Madam Chair Pena, if I may just add another part of this, which is as a mental health therapist, this pandemic has also affected therapists, and therapists have, suffered the effects, mentally, emotionally, of having to deal not only with our own trauma, but secondary trauma, listening to the stories of our clients. Also, most of us have not been doing in-person sessions. We've been doing them over online telehealth platforms, which is really difficult, especially, for, I think, new clients seeking mental health services. It's kind of hard to take on new clients in this COVID environment to do, proper intake sessions and things like that remotely over the internet. That's been very difficult. So there's been a lot of just access to care issues. And so I think that, coupled with our lack of, licensed providers in this area, I think we're going to be looking into more of the peer support and, really helping people, with their own, mental health first aid and, self-care, things like that. I think we have to get really creative with how we deliver services. It's been really difficult all around. So yeah, I think this is such an important topic.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Councillor Sena.
Thank you for that, Councillor Pena and Madam Chair, for this presentation. My question, and also relating to the previous presentation that we had, I'm a big supporter of language access. When we're thinking about the public service announcements, we just heard that the biggest struggle within a lot of our refugee and immigrant communities is access to this information in a language that they understand. Is there considerations for these PSAs to also be in multiple languages? And following up on that, on some of these behavioral health services, are they also culturally competent?
Madam Chair, Councillor Sena, thank you so much for raising that. It is an utmost priority of the Department of Behavioral Health Services that all of the services we provide and the services we contract with are culturally competent. We do, particularly even in our department, translate all of our paperwork into different languages, and we have interpreter services available at all times for any of our clients. So that's particularly in the provision of services, but absolutely agree with you. Our public messaging needs to be multilingual in order to meet the needs of the local community. And I think even above and beyond that, we need to make sure that we are meeting the need in the community around kind of medical literacy, right? So it does not make sense for us to put out a flyer that is full of medical jargon that folks don't realize is an opportunity for them to access services. So linguistically appropriate, and also meeting the clients where they are so that they have the opportunity to understand the information that's provided to them.
Thank you. Commissioner Quesada.
Yeah, I just thank you, Madam Chair. I was just wondering, there's so much language technology out there now that are we accessing that technology, or do we have to have somebody who actually we hire that speaks, specific languages? Because there is technology now, which is a pretty amazing technology out there. Are we looking at tapping into that? So if somebody comes in, we're not trying to scrumble around trying to find somebody who could speak the language, but actually use this technology to communicate people. Because the reason why I say that is because when someone's in crisis, they're in crisis now. And sometimes, our response to that crisis is where there's a gap in services, right? So we're always looking for the gap in services. And so if language and communication is a gap in our service, then I'm just throwing that out there that maybe we should look at some of that technology to make sure that we respond, appropriately. Thank you.
Madam Chair, Commissioner, we are using both. So we have in-person interpreter services, particularly for clients who request it. We often try initially with kind of the language line, which is kind of real-time, immediate. Sometimes people prefer an in-person. And of course, if we have folks who are hearing impaired, we use almost like a Skype type of a venue where folks can visually use the interpreter services. So we're using a hybrid of existing technologies as well as in-person translational services.
Thank you, Margarita. Thank you, Commissioner. I don't see any additional questions. Maybe Director Pierce wants to answer that from the city side as well.
Oops. Thank you. Thank you, Councilor Pena. What really occurs to me, and I think this is a really important discussion, and appreciate the presentation and Commissioner Piscotti bringing this and everything Margarita spoke to. It's just essential. We have talked about, because our community centers have remained open during COVID times, and we are caring for a good number of children, helping provide the virtual education. So we are really open to different kinds of resources that we can have available. We've really done some training with our staff to be just having their very tuned up and aware of how students are doing. So, but we welcome further partnership there, and the same with our child development centers. And it speaks to those younger children as well as their parents, because I appreciate the comment. I mean, everybody's impacted, youth, adults, the therapists, everybody providing it. So we have the opportunity to keep our eyes and ears on a good handful of people, because we remain open. And how we've done that is through staff training to be aware of some of the signs and symptoms of distress. But I always think there's opportunity to do more. So I welcome further, as always, Margarita and I collaborate, and anything else as we work with community partners to address these needs. So thank you.
Madam Chair.
Thank you, Director. APS Board Member Candelaria.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a real quick question regarding ADA compliance. Is this information ADA compliance, and are we there yet with some of that? Thank you.
Thank you. I don't know who can answer that. Or respond, I should say.
Madam Chair, where are we discussing ADA compliance?
Okay, you know what I'm asking about, so that we can be clear, we talk about equity within the city and how we do some of this, is compliance with those who are hearing, who have disability with hearing, or such as myself, who is blind. How do we get this information out to folks? How do we do this within, our compliance with ADA?
Madam Chair, Ms. Candelaria Patterson, I think that's a difficult question to answer, right? I'm not as familiar with that piece, and I hate to just knee-jerk a response to you. So that's something we'll need to look into and definitely incorporate that into our plan, so that we ensure that all of the populations across our community, regardless of their need, are able to receive that information. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. I keep wanting to call you Candy. I actually, I just kind of want to just end this conversation just by saying that, I really appreciate it. I think we can do, and maybe Chair Piscotti can form a committee out of this group, just to really look at ways how we can get this information out via PSAs or through the media, because I think it's really important. I actually want to thank Ms. Patterson, APS Board Member Patterson, for really the invitation also at last meeting, myself and Councilor Bassan, and I'd like to again extend an invitation to anybody from the county who wants to attend. But youth suicide is really up as well during all this. And I know that we'll be meeting to talk about how we address that moving forward, and how we, help our youth in our community, either via messaging in terms of what services are available, or what else we can do. So if anybody else wants to join in on that meeting, just go ahead and contact me or my analyst, and we'll get you invited to that. So thank you. So now we are in old business, continuing the baby behavioral health initiative update. We have a few folks who will provide this update this evening, and this is Margarita Chavez Sanchez, Dr. Marcia Harris, and Dr. Yolanda Morales, and Dorothy Habret, and Greg Perez.
Madam Chair, thank you again. As a part of our update today, I want to just give a couple of high-level updates. And as you see, we have a group of folks on the call who are going to speak to some of the work that's being done in the department. I will start by saying, we continue to provide and have implemented COVID-safe precautions. We continue to serve clients on the CARE campus. Things are starting to go well. Our staff is beginning to receive their vaccinations. Again, we're continuing to maintain all of our COVID-safe precautions and continue to serve our clients on the campus. I want to introduce folks that are on the call today because I think it's really important for this group to understand the level of medical oversight and clinical supervision that happens with all of the provision of services through the Department of the Behavioral Health Services. So first, I'll introduce all of our folks here, and then I'll allow each of them to speak about the work that they do. So first, I have Dr. Marcia Harris here. She is the Department of Behavioral Health Services Assistant Director, and she is a licensed psychologist here in the state of New Mexico. She served for approximately 15 years as the Director of Treatment Services at the University of New Mexico Addiction and Substance Abuse Treatment Program. She also managed the UNM Psychiatric Center Outpatient Psychotherapy Unit during part of that time. And while applied at UNMH, she was appointed the academic title of Assistant Professor to the UNM School of Medicine, Department of Psychiatry. We also have Dr. Yolanda Morales on the call, who currently serves as the Medical Director for the CARE campus. She has more letters behind her name that I can even list out right now, but she is a PhD, PMHC, and SBC, MBA, MA, LP, and LPCC. And also is the Director of Advanced Practice Care at UNM and has spent over 20 years at UNM providing clinical care and oversight. And also Dr. Dorothy Habret, who currently serves as the Medical Director for Bernalillo County Fire and Emergency Communications and Dispatch Center. In addition to being an emergency room physician, she is an assistant professor for the UNM Department of Emergency Medicine and faculty for the UNM EMS Medical Direction Consortium. So I want to introduce, again, as I mentioned, they are on the call with us because I think it's really important for everyone to understand the level of clinical oversight and supervision that happens in all of the work that we do. And as a little side note, I'll also mention that Dr. Martin Gonzalez from UNM also provides some medical oversight for all of our contracted UNMH providers, like those who provide care through the Transition Planning Team and the Resource Reentry Center. So Dr. Harris, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself and speaking a little bit about your role on the CARE campus and the clinical oversight you provide there. I think you're still on mute, Dr. Harris.
You're still muted.
Yes.
There you go.
There you go.
I think you got me. Thank you very much. Despite all the degrees, my knowledge of technology is more like, early 20th century, not even the 21st. So thank you for bearing with me. Just to say a little something when we talk about clinical oversight, I started working with the county 2 years ago because the county was expanding into services like our crisis stabilization unit. I've worked in mental health in Albuquerque since the 80s and grew up here and have had a real commitment to our community and what we try to do. So the issue in terms of building programs and assuring that your programs meet standards is something that I've been involved with for a while. And one of the ways we did that is to work through the accreditation process. So for all our behavioral health programs, we have sought and achieved accreditation from the Commission on Accreditation of Rehabilitation Facilities, which goes all around actually the world, looking at programs, and they do pretty thorough things. But their concern is, are you providing quality care? Are you respecting the people you serve? Are you training and supporting your staff? And are you providing outcomes for the services, letting people know some of the outcomes? So we underwent that process. This is the first time we've worked to accredit the programs. When the commission comes through, they have an option as a new program. They can say, you've got potential. We're going to give you a year's accreditation, and then we're going to be back. We have a big to-do list for you. The other alternative they have is to give you a 3-year accreditation that said, yeah, you got some things to work on, but you're very much on the right track. So we had 3 separate programs that actually received the 3-year accreditation. And one of the things that means is for your clinical services that there's direct supervision of the counselors and clinicians who are providing the service. In part, that's my role. We also have other independently licensed clinicians, and we spend quite a bit of time supporting and training our staff down to the paraprofessional level. We've talked a little bit about cultural competency, and one of the cultural competencies we deal with is the stigma that people who have problems with addiction or mental health problems experience. And interestingly, people stigmatize themselves. They hear themselves talked about in no more than just who they are as, you know, your addiction or your mental health diagnosis, not so much being treated as a whole person. So they stigmatize themselves, and all of us probably carry some judgments that we have to be educated about and work through. So we've actually had an in-house initiative for the past year working with our staff to understand some of the root causes of addiction, some of the challenges of mental health. That's been another part of the clinical oversight. Also recognizing that oftentimes people seek assistance, and they, in the mental health field, I think Commissioner Piscotti, this might sound familiar to you, they really are looking for help, and they're hoping they don't have to change anything about what they're doing. And one of our messages is to engage with people and help them see what might be theirs to change. In our community for both addiction and mental health, I think so many folks become disconnected. They become disconnected from family, from the community, from having a role. And so part of our social model program is to try to help people rebuild, or even just to build some sense of connection. And this is an intensive, ongoing process. Our counselors have worked with a broad range of people. Our clinicians and our technicians are often in recovery themselves. And so they understand at a lived experience level what some of the challenges are for our clients. And I wanted to only give a brief summary because I'm impressed by how much you all deal with in any given night. But if there are any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Thank you. I think we'll move on to the next presenter, Margarita, if you want to introduce them, and then we'll open the floor for questions.
Sure. Thank you, Dr. Morales.
Good afternoon to everyone. Thank you for having me today. Let me tell you, it's been a pleasure for the last 2 years to collaborate with the county at the CARE campus. I think within the 2 years, we have done a lot of work. We've been nationally recognized for being an innovative and creative program. We work within a social detox setting and provide medical and psychiatric screening, as well as psychopharmacological medication, detoxification management. I provide that oversight. So I work in collaboration with the county, but My job really is to make sure that we provide the best services possible and that we follow the standard of care and that we constantly work at improving outcomes and processes, especially, you know, it's been very challenging this year, this last year to amidst the epidemic, to make sure that we do not decrease those services and that we not only and move forward and progress. So our staff there, our UNM providers are credentialed through the School of Medicine of UNM. We also bring not only that, but we bring resource from UNM in the form of consultation with every kind of provider that we know, whether it be epidemiology, whether it be addictionologists. So we have a lot of resource at our disposal. I think I'm not sure what more, but maybe if we have questions, I'll try to come up with them.
Thank you, Dr. Morales.
Thank you.
And last but not very least, Dr. Hebrat, who is our medical director for Bernalillo County Fire and Emergency Communications.
Hi, good afternoon. So my name's Dorothy. I'm an ER doctor at UNM and I'm also an EMS physician. So I'm board certified in both emergency medicine and EMS. I've been working with Bernalillo County as their medical director and then also at the dispatch center, so as their medical director. And then I am appointed member on the medical control board with the city of Albuquerque, which basically is 5 physicians that provide protocols for our EMS fire rescue. So that includes AFR as well as BCFD and AAS. So as a group of 5 physicians, we are the ones that are just constantly updating and ensuring that our protocols are up to date, and we meet on a monthly basis. So.
Thank you, Dr. Hebrat. And Madam Chair, I'll just, in closing, again, the importance is to really understand the level of clinical oversight. While myself and Dr. Harris are both county staff, Dr. Harris has more than enough clinical experience to really help drive the clinical work that we do on our campus and work with our clients in that way, in conjunction with our partnership with UNM and Dr. Morales. And it's really important to recognize the role that public safety plays in what we do on our campus, right? Clients, really having a good understanding of what clients are appropriate to come to our campus. I know there has been some questions or concerns in previous meetings about ensuring that we expand and identify and ensure, expand and ensure that clients can access care on our campus. And the Medical Control Board does also discuss the appropriate clients that can be transferred via EMS to our campus, again, based on the criteria that we have in place. And so this is just a venue if there are questions for our medical oversight team. If not, it's an opportunity for you all to informally or formally meet them and know that if there are any questions about that level of care, we're always here to answer those questions and provide support.
Thank you, Margarita, and all the presenters. I don't know if there's any questions. If not, I just want to say that I think that you guys do just an outstanding job there. You know, I have personal experience with friends and family members who have accessed services there at the care center. And, you know, I just really commend you. I know it's just such a difficult job. So we will move on to the next item, which is opportunities for subcommittees to address the commission. Are there any subcommittee members here this evening?
Madam Chair, we don't have any subcommittees here to address the committee. I will make note that which is really important for folks that are on this call, that we are moving forward with the previously passed school-based health center project. And so especially our school board members who are on the call, we will be reaching out to you soon. I see the happy dance from Commissioner Quesada. So we will be actually working very closely with Commissioner Quesada to work with our school board members and APS staff to get moving on our school-based health centers out in the community.
That's great. Thank you, Margarita. So now we're on other business. Do we have any other business this evening? Hearing none, our next meeting is scheduled for February 25th at 5 p.m. via Zoom. And congratulations again to our new chairwoman, Commissioner Piscotti, and our vice chairwoman, Councilor Bassan. So with that, there being no further business, this meeting, ABC GC meeting, is adjourned. Take care, everyone.